Every adjustment you make in scope is the opposite effect on target. Alright, today's video is going to be featuring the Hogster Stimulus 19mm 256 resolution thermal optic. This is a dedicated weapon sight that Bering Optics will be soon releasing to the market at an unheard of price point of $14.95. So the Stimulus designation for this Hogster, I believe Bering's coming from that. If I look up the definition, a thing that rouses activity or energy in someone or something, a spur or incentive. If you've been hunting with red or green lights, or you've been using digital night vision, and you've been employing those technologies at the lower price points, waiting for thermal to come down in price, I believe Bering is trying to stimulate you by offering a $14.95 thermal dedicated weapon sight. This is a departure from those standard Hogsters that have been in the market for over a year or more, in that the thermal sensor or core is not 384. So let me just read some quick specs here for the Hogster Stimulus. It's a 256 by 192 resolution, 12 micron, 30 hertz refresh rate, has a focusable objective lens and a 2.3 base magnification, with one zoom level that could give you a 4.6 effective digital zoom. Same housing as the Hogster R25 and 35s, and it includes their OEM QD mount. The Hogster Stimulus runs on two CR123s. It is different from the other Hogster models in that it comes with a single USB-C line-out cable. And this is if you want to hook up an external battery supply or perhaps connect it to a computer. So what it's missing is the video connection, because this Hogster does not have video out capabilities. Bering is very wise to just keep the scope as functional as possible at the basic levels in order to get the price down to effectively draw more consumers into the thermal night vision hunting or shooting realm. 19mm on the front and front focusable objective. I'm really glad they went with the focus on the front. A lot of entry scopes do not have this, and you never quite get the perfect clarity at various distances unless you have a front focus. So very good there. I'll try to get the camera behind the optic to give you an idea of the menu and setup and layout of that. The objective for today's video and range work with the Hogster Stimulus, I'm going to attempt to give you rules of thumb for zeroing the Hogster Stimulus, and it will also apply to the other Hogster models. But there are some rules of thumb that I want to share based on my extensive experience with all the Hogster line to make your ability to zero these thermal optics at 100 yards a little easier. So here in a moment we'll get started with that. I'll go ahead and get the bench set up with the other components for the range test today. Alright, where we'll begin with the rules of thumb video for zeroing a Hogster scope thermal weapon sight, explanation on the rifle system. So I've helped a number of people over the last few years with zeroing their Hogsters, and there's a recurring theme, okay? A lot of folks, they have a particular rifle and a particular load that they want the Hogster to work well with. And so the rule of thumb that I have is, in order to get familiar with your new thermal weapon sight, choose your most accurate rifle. It may not be the one that you intend or bought the Hogster to run on, but what you want to do to get familiar with the controls and the process of zeroing a thermal sight is you want to be as accurate as you can be on target at 50 and 100 yards. And so therefore pick a rifle system that is going to give you that capability. Also, start with a day optic. I have a Leupold 8.5 by 25 on the bench. I want to know that my rifle system is capable of MOA or better. Again, experience speaking here in terms of helping folks out that have tried immediately to take the Hogster, put it on a rifle, go out to the range, and they are claiming 2-3 inch variants and groups, and come to find out they either just put that rifle together, they just bought that rifle, and they didn't know what the inherent baseline accuracy is with a good day optic. So that's why I have two variations of ammunition on the table. This is another rule of thumb. Select an ammo for zeroing that is, again, MOA or better capable. If you are generally shooting 2 MOA with ammunition, then expect to have some difficulty in zeroing a thermal weapon sight, because they usually don't give you a refined picture as a high magnification day optic would. So this setup that I bring to you today, actually that upper on the AR-15 is brand new to me. It's unfired. I've never shot it before, and so I am unsure of what my baseline accuracy is with it. So taking my own medicine, I'm going to start out by shooting the two ammunition choices here on the table, an 88 grain Hornady match and a 90 grain Federal Fusion. Using the day optic, I'm going to see which yields the closest to MOA or better accuracy, and if it doesn't happen, then I brought my trusty 6.5 Grendel with me that's not pictured right now, that I know shoots MOA or better, and again, I will switch rifles if I need to. Alright, so a little update on the zeroing of the Hogster Stimulus and the first few rules of thumb, which are to get a baseline accuracy of your rifle and your ammo without the Hogster Stimulus even involved in the equation. So this was using the Leupold 8.5 by 25 scope. These are the 90 grain Fusion 5-shot group at 100 and the 88 grain Hornady ELDM 88 grain at 100 yards. And as you can see there, I am barely holding 2, maybe 2.5, possibly 3 inches here in this spread. So this is not good enough for me to now add a Hogster Stimulus to the equation and expect to zero it well. So as I spoke to earlier, if you get fixated on a particular rifle, caliber, and ammunition, and you attempt to bend the system to be a MOA shooter when it isn't, it certainly isn't going to pay dividends when you're zeroing a thermal optic. So at this point, the 224 Valkyrie is not going to work out for this application today. I'm going to put the day optic on the 6.5 Grendel that I brought with me, and we'll refire at this point here. It's open, and we'll see if we can get MOA or better before we get to the Hogster Stimulus. Alright, final update on the baseline accuracy of the rifle system and ammunition before going to the Hogster Stimulus zeroing process. Again, we had 224 Valkyrie 90 grain, 224 Valkyrie 88 grain, and then 6.5 Grendel 90 grain. And while there are 2 outside of the cluster of 3 shots, so this cluster here is 3 shots, 4 and 5, they're all within a thumb, whereas if you put the thumb here, you have some that are far, and then the thumb here, you have some that are far. So this will work for zeroing a thermal optic. More times than not, it's going to give you, I mean, this is MOA, these 4 here, and this could be shooter induced error, but I know this rifle and this load are one of my most accurate, so that's what I'm going forward with. Alright, the next rule of thumb for zeroing a Hogster Stimulus is your target selection. I know a lot of guys that use ranges that are existing on their property. That's the logical thing to do, and as such, you'll see on this range that we have targets that are well used. Here on the left, this target base would not be a good option to utilize for zeroing a thermal weapon, because every one of those holes is going to allow a thermal variance to occur, When you look at this backboard through a thermal optic, it's going to be way too busy in terms of the scope trying to render the thermal variance occurring on this media. Other options people use are still targets, and those are fine, depending on the weather conditions. Today we have a bright sunny day where high temp is going to be about 70 and then low temp about 40, so there's lots of thermal variance during the hours of the day to do your zero work with. If you don't have a steel target, then I present to you what my option is, and this is usually what I carry around with me as I go hunt to hunt or from property to property, and when I'm helping buddies zero in their hogsters. And that is, I just find these white poster boards at any Walmart or Kroger, whatever. I like white because it reflects the sunlight, and it just usually works better than a darker color. I have one hot hands taped on here, and it's a full hot hands. I've gotten all the powder down to the bottom of it, folded it up nice and tight, but this is one complete hot hands. Now, depending on the thermal hogster being used, in other words, the Super Hogster and the Hogster R35, they have excellent base magnification and higher resolutions, so usually you can get away with one hot hands at 50 or 100 yards. The R25 and what I expect to see here in a short while with the Hogster Stimulus with a 19mm front lens, it may not be enough resolution or magnification to get a real good sight picture on one hot hand. So I brought extra with me, and that's my rule of thumb for you, is not only to bring an adequate backboard for your hot hands, but to bring multiple of them, because depending on the image you get at 100 yards, I may need 2 or maybe even 3 of these. Or you can use the hot hands that are about 3 inches large for your boots or your back. Just buy a larger one. So today we'll play around and we'll see what it looks like with a couple different hot hands at various yardages. All right, simple as that. So the very next step then in zeroing the Hogster Stimulus is to apply it to the rifle of choice, okay? And it comes with a very nice QD mount labeled Bering Optics right down in here. And by QD, it's adjustable, quick release, transfers from gun to gun very well. Bering does an absolute fantastic job with their mount to scope interface. They use proper torque, and then I believe they put an epoxy in here as well to lock that in, and it's collimated at the factory for best alignment. So users should not, I repeat, should not have to adjust these screws whatsoever, and if you're having mount suspicions, then get with Bering first, because taking these bolts out and messing with the mount system for the Hogster could void your warranty. So this is ready to go. It does have adjustability in the sense that if you open it, throw it forward, and then press that screw that's now exposed right here, you can turn that for increased or decreased pressure on the rail. I like number 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I put it on here on number 6. Scoot it all the way forward, and then as this comes back, you should get pressure about 45 degrees. I did not have any pressure. It went straight to close, so this is not ready to go. So I am going to press and turn the bolt a couple of turns, not full turns, but a couple of settings of adjustment. And now I'm getting tight about 45 degrees. And that ought to be good. All right, I'll fire her up and try to get you some video through the back of the eyepiece. Alright, we're back behind the Hogster Stimulus at 50 yards. And I go to the long menu. The top option is auto nuke on and off. Then you have the compass and telemetry setting there, on or off, battery voltage. Then you have your profiles. There are four profiles in all. Will stay on G1. We're about to get into the zeroing menu, and it's going to bring up some settings down on the bottom. The orientation is right and left is where it starts, and then you're going to have a given value. Now here's a rule of thumb for you. When you're entering the zeroing menu, you have to do so with care. Bring up the long menu. A lot of guys like to go quickly down to 0 and just start pressing buttons, and right there I've made adjustments not meaning to. You need to let the system catch up to the user's inputs. So I like to write down my zeroing coordinates at each stage of the process. That way if I inadvertently press a key while accessing the zero menu, I can at least go back to where I started. And then also in the fine-tuning of the zero, it makes it easier to have your settings written down. Every adjustment you make in scope is the opposite effect on target. So if on target I need to bring the bullet impact to the left, then I'm going to adjust in scope down button to the right. If I need to bring the target impact to the right, I'm going to adjust in scope up, bringing that white crosshair to the left. Vice versa on up and down. Let's say that I need to bring the impact down on target. I will need to push forward and go up with the white crosshair. I will press down button or back button and bring that white crosshair down to go up on target. So I'll put some notes in the video for you to keep all that straight, but let's take our first few shots at 50 yards, get a 0 that we can carry then to 100, and see what the target looks like at 100 yards. Alright, as the target cam picked up, I'm low and left a little bit on my 50-yard initial shot. So I will need to go back into the Hogster Stimulus zeroing menu and adjust the white crosshair over the point of impact and lock that in, write those coordinates down, and then go out to 100 yards, because that's what I'm trying to zero at, and continue zeroing from that point. Now, here's my next rule of thumb for you. It is a lot easier for me to see hot hands in the thermal, so I always have a second one ready to go, and I place it right over that point of impact, and now I'll just adjust to the center of that hot spot and call it good. Alright, here we are back at the bench, and you can hopefully see the two distinct hot hands there at 50 yards. And so what we are going to do now is enter the zeroing menu. Okay, here's another method of zeroing the Bering stimulus. I'm no longer at the range, but I got to thinking about this later and thought that perhaps me saying the adjustments are opposite in scope versus what you want to move the bullet on target. Bering has incorporated a one-shot zero feature in their zeroing menu. So if we go to the zero menu, and we are at true center 0.0 centimeters on left, right, up, and down. At the range in the illustration, I had an impact that was low and left from true center. So that means on the right orientation, which is what I'm on now, and the right values are highlighted in blue. So this is a little bit confusing to the eye, because when I see the values on the bottom bar, I think white is the highlighted, but you're going to be changing the value highlighted in blue. So in order to come left, so I'm using the forward button to come left. I'm going to press the menu button one time. That changes the orientation. It also changed the highlighted values at the bottom. Now left is highlighted in white, and up and down is highlighted in blue. and then if I press down, so this is about the adjustment I made in field for the illustration of the video. So what you'll see me do next is that white center dot did not move when I made those adjustments. The white center dot is your point of aim reference, and you will place that, now that you've made adjustments in the general area of where your impact was using the white crosshair, you'll place the white dot over your original point of aim, and you want that white crosshair to be right over where your point of impact is. And when you're ready to lock that in, you'll press and hold the menu button. So right now you'll see we no longer have 0, 0 as our values. It is now left 17.7 centimeters and down 35.4 centimeters. Alright, so hopefully this better explains the use of the Bering Optics zeroing tool, which is essentially a center dot that moves as you input new values. And what I mean by that is when I press and hold menu, now that white dot has moved to the new crosshair location. So that white dot is going to remap itself to your center of your 0 coordinates, so that your next adjustment you can also use it again to keep it on your point of aim and just move the white crosshairs to your point of impact. The key here is you want to adjust the white crosshair over the point of impact, which was just slightly left and below the point of aim. So by using that center dot, because we started from 0, 0, that's going to be pretty close right there. So I'm going to lock that in by holding the menu button. There you go. And now we are ready to move to 100 yards. Alright, we're about to take some shots with the Hogster Stimulus at 100 yards. I'm going to leave this target as is. This is representative of a lot of guys' ranges where it has pre-existing targets and you just more or less find open spots and shoot. But I want you to see what the image through the thermal unit is of this type of target setup. And then I've carried my clean backboard from the 50 yard. I taped over the shot so I could mark it. We shouldn't have any issue seeing that at 100 yards. And I've left the 1 hot hands on there to see what it looks like, and I'll determine based on my aiming refinement if I need to add a hot hands to it or if we can shoot at the 1. So let's get back to the bench. Okay, here we are at 100 yards with the Hogster Stimulus, and what I'm trying to illustrate to you here are the 2 various target setups down there. One on the right of the crosshairs in the upper quadrant is a mixture of targets and you really can't make anything out there, and then on the left I have that white target backboard with the hot hands in the center of it, and you can make out an aiming point. So you may need to get a target set up like that, carry it around with you if you plan to do some zeroing out in the field, because I find this works best with the Hogster units in terms of getting a clean target to use. Now, the hot hands is quite small. I'm going to see if I can actually zero using the zoom. I can use that single hot hands with this crosshair and put an impact in there. So I'm going to try using the zoom to make the shot, and then we'll go from there and see how I can make adjustments. That's pretty tough in terms of seeing the single hot hands even with the zoom at 100 yards with the 19mm. My rule of thumb is to take 2 shots so that you can adjust to the center of them Okay, so I am going to try to put the other hot hands on the target and see if we can see separation between the two to make the final adjustment. Not sure that we're going to be able to. And then let's say those two impacts were actually closer to where you want to be and you had to make a fine adjustment. You would lose the ability to use separate hot hands, and that's where you need to make the adjustment. Up is down, down is up, right is left, left is right theory. So let's go back and play at the bench. I'll cover up those with the hot hands and we'll see what it looks like. Alright, as I suspected, you really can't tell the separation between the two hot hands, even though the impacts were about 3 inches right and 2.5 inches low. The two hot hands just look like one. If I were to do this again, I would recommend 2 hot hands together for your aiming point. That larger white patch there is much easier to aim on now that I'm looking at it where they're almost side by side. So you might need a larger thermal hot hands for the Stimulus and the Hogster R25. You'll might find that easier. Okay, so you're at this point, you know you need to adjust up and left. So if I go into the zeroing menu, very carefully and slowly, making sure not to make any adjustments there, I start on the right and left orientation. So let's go to the right 4 clicks, which will bring the impact left on target. Okay, middle button, and let's go down 3 clicks. Okay, so you can see that white crosshatch is low and right, which is indicative of what we saw on the target. So we'll lock that in, and we'll take another shot here. Okay, we are now on the opposite side. Instead of 4 o'clock, we're more in the 10:30, 11 o'clock, which means we could probably have the values that we adjusted. So I came 4 to the right, which adjusted the impacts left, and I came 3 down. I'm going to go back and adjust 2 to the left and 2 up, and it should bring it right onto the hot hands. Let me cover up those 2 impacts. Alright, we are going to go into the final, or try for the final adjustment of 0. I now need to come to the left 2 values and up 2 values. So left 2 and up 2. Lock that in, and 1 final shot for confirmation. Alright, I'll take that. About 1 inch high at 100 yards. And you can see that that final shot is relatively between the 2 clusters of 2 shots, which were over adjustments. And so if you wanted to, you could go back to the scope and make probably 1 more incremental value change up in the scope to come down on target. But that's zeroing the Hogster Stimulus.